Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. Welcome to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. I am coming to you live from Autodesk University. It is the second day of the expo. To my immediate left is a sea of people. Hello, sea of people. If you're not paying any attention to me, you probably should, because we're about to have a fantastic conversation about all things construction. And to join me in this exciting narrative, I am joined by Christy Steffen, the Assistant Director at Gaylor University with Gaylor Electric, and Brandon Floyd, the Director of Quality from Rosendin Electric. And today, we're going to focus on the specialty contractors and how they empower their field teams to make better decisions, the importance of training and building trust and supporting our field teams, and those feedback loops and thinking about an environment of continuous improvement. So how are you guys doing today? Are you getting fired up about the event? You feeling good?
Yeah, this is great. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, it's great. It was awesome. That general session was incredible.
Yeah, it's always energizing to just see all the big announcements, and we're in such a great environment to learn and share and hear from everybody else. So I appreciate both of you joining me to contribute to that narrative. But without any further ado, let's jump into the first question. And Brandon, I'm going to throw this one to you. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing for specialty contractors like yourselves regarding ensuring that safety on site and delivering quality to your projects to your clients?
I think some of the biggest challenges we're having, right, is the delivery, the market time, delivery to market, the speed of the schedule, the durations we have to, get these projects completed and turned over, which really, makes it difficult to onboard the teams quickly, get them up to speed, and get our programs in place to make sure we deliver the safety and quality that the customers expect.
It's a multi-layered challenge. And Christy, I'd love to hear what your team's thinking in this regard as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have the same issues, that manpower, just having enough people to put on the job, and then making sure that they do know what they're doing and they are safe is definitely a big issue.
I feel like folks are tired of the labor challenge conversation, and I've talked about it so much. But it's just such an important nuance that we have to be focused on right now, because now's the time for us to act. We have to find ways to augment our labor. We have to find ways to improve productivity and make these tasks take less time, because in 5 years, when folks start retiring at a greater rate with the aging construction workforce we have, now it's kind of okay, there's a challenge. We got to feel with it. It's gonna change pretty dramatically soon. So I appreciate the focus and emphasis there. And Christy, I'd be interested to hear a bit more. What are some of the innovative steps that your team's taking to manage some of these challenges and ensure that safe environment is existing while also delivering that quality that your clients are expecting? Like where do you see your challenges and big opportunities right now?
Absolutely. So we do have a large manufacturing and prefabrication. So we're doing a lot of things in the manufacturing facility before we put it out to the job site. So that really helps us to have less people in dangerous situations and really building in a controlled environment.
I love that approach, and I keep hearing it more and more often because, well, the last 3 years obviously were rife with challenges. And I think it pushed us to think about offsite options in a far more robust way. And that's a silver lining, I think, that came from that, because there's always been some hesitancy. And, sometimes if the dots aren't connected between your manufacturing facility and the site that you're actually building, something might not line up very well, and that doesn't feel good. But I think as we continue to improve our workflows and our digital tools, especially in the cloud, I might be biased there, we're in a better position. Brandon, I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I agree with Christy. I mean, doing some of the offsite prefabrication and some of the modular stuff that's out there, I think that helps a lot with, building things in a controlled environment, improving safety there as well, and being able to meet some of the schedule demands by doing that offsite.
And how does this map back to what you're doing at Gaylor University? I'd be curious to hear more.
So Gaylor University was actually started with our owner's mother. When we started 40 years ago, he had her be the first director of Gaylor University.
So for 40 years, you've had a university at Gaylor.
Yes.
That's
I don't know
incredible.
I don't know that they've always called it that exactly, but it's the education piece. Our previous CEO and our current CEO are very much in favor of education and continuing to educate our people. So that's what our Gaylor University is, our learning management system that I manage. So a lot of the online stuff that helps us to deliver when we have projects in 22 states across the country. And then it also, we have craft instructors. So they go out on sites and to our different locations and help to supplement any kind of training that we provide. And of course, the apprenticeship schools that all of our electricians attend.
It's really cool to hear that the organization has had such a storied history on training specifically. And I feel like in recent years now that narrative has even really turned up, because obviously the tools are starting to become more complex, even if the UIs are better we evolve the technology. Yes. But we have to empower our folks to be able to use these. And no longer are we in the situation where the VDC team are the only ones that are using this tech. Like everybody on site has an opportunity. And it's such a great one. So I'm encouraged to hear that. Brandon, I'd love to hear a bit more, as far as where you're at in your training process and what, Rosendin's up to.
I think there's a few key things that Rosendin's been working on. One, they've partnered with Grand Canyon University to do a pre-apprenticeship program to start getting more people, to understand what's the trade about. Is this something you want to do? And that way we can help them get into the apprenticeship. On the other side of it, we definitely have a large learning and development team, but also with the quality side, we've put together our own quality and commissioning certification program where we're able to kind of hopefully train everybody with some hands-on with, using the technology before they get out in the field. So it's not just a presentation or a lecture. It's, hey, how do you use the tool? Where do you find the information to be able to check and provide, do those quality checks out there, and then how to execute that using the technology we have.
I'm so encouraged to hear that. And I'm starting to hear more messaging from folks that are part of the training programs on meeting folks in different areas in different ways too, because not everybody learns in the same way. Not everybody understands and retains information. I mean, I've sat through those 8-hour training sessions where you're in a room with two very nice people who are going to talk at you in one way for 8 hours and say, so you know all the things now, and now you're going to go out to the site and use it, right? And some folks thrive in that, and they gather everything and they remember. I am not one of those people, to be very candid. And so it's really great to see the differing options and giving somebody a chance to come back and look at the materials again, instead of just this one-way prescriptive, here's your session and now you're done. So I appreciate that, robust look that you've got. Brandon, you've seen firsthand the evolution of software, and in your, storied history with software and tech deployment on your projects through your career, could you tell me a bit more about how those programs have evolved? So I think we touched on it, but early in your career, where were things? Were you in that just everybody's in a room, you talk to them once and go? And what was that process like?
Early on, a long time ago, we won't go back that far, but originally there was, it was paper documents, you had the Excel documents, but we started back when Vela was a product, and that's kind of where we started with Vela before it became an Autodesk product in 2012, I think is when it shifted over. So I've seen that evolution into BIM 360 Field, PlanGrid, which we use both of those, and now the Build product is kind of the evolution of bringing both those together. So I think it's come a long ways being able to, visualize things through the documents, having that transparency, and being able to build that standardization to be able to execute that, the process is the same way every time.
It's encouraging to see just that continued reduction of paper that's on site as well. I mean, when I joined construction, I was working for a federal contractor, so it was an even different circumstance as far as the requirements and the proposals and everything else that we were working on. But it's just good to see that shift, because it keeps everybody on that same page. You're no longer beholden to plans that became out of date and you didn't get the updated set, or somebody missed a memo and you went and built something and then you got to tear it back down. And so it's great to see that that's evolved at your organization over the years. And Christy, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your role specifically at Gaylor University. And I know you don't have a traditional construction background, and so
I do not.
Can you share how that unfolded and how you ended up where you are now?
Absolutely. So it's kind of a crazy story, but I was 17 years in public education. So I was a special ed teacher, and then I was in a school district that went 1-to-1 with iPads. So 10,000 students and 600 teachers all got iPads and a learning management system in the same, over about 5 years. And I helped to roll that out to everyone. At the time, my principal left and went to Gaylor Electric because we had a good relationship with them through interns. And then he called me up about 2 months into his job and said, hey, I want you to come to Gaylor and roll out a learning management system here. So it started with our learning management system. But then as we started to get with on board with Build, I started to go out and help first hosting the webinars on that training, right? The webinars, like, again, 8 2-hour webinars that you may or may not have sunk in. We've really been able to turn that. I've been able to hire an additional person to help support, and we go out on site all the time. So we're going into the office or to the site to talk to the individual teams and the individual projects so that we are getting that one-on-one, not like 8 hours of having no idea, like, how does this apply to me? We pull up their project and talk about where can you be more efficient in your specific project using the Build products.
I love that because it's such a continuous improvement focused conversation. And there's an opportunity to be nimble with our training programs where you deploy something, whether it's a module that's 5-minute bite-sized trainings or it's that 2-hour training, because sometimes that is important. You have to deliver that. It's not fully absent. But if you have that feedback, you can change and you can make improvements. And
Absolutely.
as long as you let your teams know that, you're not requesting that feedback to be punitive or anything. It's like, we want to know, we want to do this better so you feel empowered. And it sounds like you've got the resources in place to do that, which is great.
Yes.
I hope others out there listening understand and, hear that, because you have to staff those teams, like the training, especially as we bring new folks into the industry or people from other industries as well, to get them up to speed. We really do need to have the tools in place to let them, feel like they're part of the message and part of the story. And so that's really encouraging. So Brandon, I got another question for you. I think it's very safe to say that efficiency and quality don't always go hand in hand when a construction schedule gets crunched or the fast track approach shows up to deliver something on time. We're constantly under pressure, and change conditions and delays and material supplies. All the challenges we're all very familiar with are contributing here. So I'd be curious, how do you help your teams make the best decisions with all of those priorities in mind, especially when they're in the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a good question. And I think sometimes people think that the quality side of it's an additional piece that's added on top of what's going on out there. But if it's done correctly, it should make you more efficiency, in your processes by, putting the plan together early on, being proactive with quality, and then doing those first of kinds or those mock-ups to show what good looks like so the teams can execute it correctly the first time. So I think quality is going to gain efficiency and safety across the site.
I like
Absolutely. Prevents rework.
Exactly.
We've actually started connecting our quality forms in assets. So you can't you can't say you're done until you have finished that quality form connected directly to the asset.
I like that. And it's such a deliberate move, both in what you're sharing as far as that planning and making sure everything is, dialed in so you know what to expect, because that does definitely yield quality instead of the chaotic just-in-time delivery where everything is, all over the place. And it's also nice that you've got that documentation. There's a paper trail that really emphasizes we've done this and this is locked in. So it sounds like, two pieces to a very challenging but incredibly important puzzle, especially if, project happens to be behind schedule or some of your materials, vanished or didn't show up on time, which I feel like we're all dealing with very, very regularly right now. I hope that our, supply chain starts to normalize, but I think the message mixed into that is control what you can. So everything you're sharing right now are things you can control. Obviously, you can warehouse some of your materials and supplies and such, but you can't do that for all of them. And, those are the ways you can make that continuous improvement in your project to find those, small profit margin increases or just, stick to the schedule that you were committed to. So that's really encouraging to hear. And Christy, I'd like to hear a bit more. It sounds like you're very tied into the software and technology, and Brandon as well, but I'm going to kick this one your way first. Can you tell me, with data as a key input for decision-making, how do you build trust across your teams to really lean on these tools that use data and give them the insights to make decisions and hopefully, in the field and not feel, that the dubious, or the quality might have some dubious nature with the quality? Let me rephrase that, with the data being maybe not great. Because I feel like in the past, people have been burned when the systems weren't set up well. And now they're like, yeah, I don't know if I trust that dashboard.
Absolutely. So the trust comes when working directly with the teams. Not just the project managers, project engineers, but going out and talking to the general superintendents, field supervisors, and making sure that everyone is on the same page and making sure that the teams are really working together so that they do trust each other, so that they do have this data. Just last week, one of my operations managers called me and he was like, I'm so excited. My general superintendent just called me and he was looking at the data and he said, I'm way behind in this phase. And he's like, it was like something crazy. And he goes, I don't trust the data. He goes, so he went in and spoke with the project engineer. They talked together. Yeah, they were behind, but it was so early on that they caught it that they can adjust. And I mean, it was like in the first room of 34 rooms in a hospital. So they can adjust and make it up. Now, if they waited until room 10 or 15, you don't have as much time to adjust. So they can figure out where their inefficiencies were. But then that helps. Okay, so we can talk through this. It's not a gotcha on the project engineer's part, and it's not a punishment for that GS. But now that GS understands the data that he's looking at, and he can take action immediately.
And that's a culture conversation right there, where you really highlight that being upfront with the challenges means that you're going to get help to solve them instead of trying to cover it. So you try to fix it.
Right.
And then now everything, as you just alluded to, you waited to room 10. That's a very different conversation than room 1. But could you imagine having that same conversation 5 years ago?
No, it wouldn't have happened because the thing is, 5 years ago, they didn't have the ability to talk it in this digital way every day.
Yeah.
They didn't have the data immediately at their fingertips. It would be maybe an email 3 weeks later that, got buried or something like that. But having that in front of them, they have the information all right there, then they can take immediate action.
I love that. And I love that example. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
Could you share some of the perspective from what your team's up to and, the journey with data?
Yeah, I mean, the trust and data side is tough, right? First, you got to be able to get clean, accurate data, but you have to get that culture built to where they're willing to put the data in and not, like you mentioned, it's not a punitive thing. We're not there to police you. We're there to take that data and how do we use that to improve ourselves, improve the job, right? Find those, those gotchas early enough so we can make those changes before the end of the job. So getting to that point with the teams, I think is the first step, that first big hurdle you have to get through. So then you can get that clean data and figure out, what you can do with it. And it's showing them, once you have it, the value behind gathering the data and how it's going to help them make their job easier.
And I heard something yesterday from Nick Hall, who's quoting Jit-Kee Chin from Suffolk. And I've had the opportunity to interview her last year. And the way she thinks about data and decision-making with our field teams right now is data is not a decision replacement. It shouldn't be the only thing that contributes to this data. It's an augmentation. It's a layer on top, because if you look at your general super that you're talking about, who has 30 years experience, you want to take advantage of that experience and then give him more certainty with that information and not push him out and say, well, your gut feel doesn't matter. But now either we validated it, or if it's different, now you have a chance to ask questions exactly like you were sharing there.
Yes.
So it's this great moment where you build that trust, as you're talking about, and you get to come back and you show your teams, there's a reason why we're doing this. In long term, we're going to be in a really fantastic position. So I'm excited about that. That's great to hear.
Absolutely. And that PE was in his 20s. So for him to have this data, for them to have that question, that conversation, I think they wouldn't have had that conversation before. It would have been him over here saying, I think we're here. And the general superintendent saying, no, we're over here. And not being able to back up that gut feeling. You also know, that knowledge base that we have in our 30-year general superintendent is going away. I mean, he's going to retire, and we have to teach those coming up. And if they don't have those gut feelings, so having the data to help teach them is so powerful.
And it's really cool watching the relationship that builds between some of the project engineers who may be newer to the industry, regardless of what their age is, but their comfort with technology versus the old salt super who's been out doing it for 30 years, because you get to really marry those two skill sets. And the super's going to benefit from the new person who's really comfortable with the iPad and go, hey, check this out. This is how this works. I validated this. Or on the other hand, the old super comes in and goes, all right, this is why we're questioning this data right now, because in my experience, this is how this works. And that's a conversation. It's not just somebody deciding you're going to go do this now, which is really exciting.
Yes.
And you get to retain that knowledge. So, that super should retire soon. He deserves it. He's worked very hard.
He does.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we get to bring that, that knowledge back into the rest of our team. So it's an exciting moment, I think, for our industry.
Absolutely.
So Brandon, I got another question for you. So when you're thinking about your team's change management processes and you're bringing these new tools into the field, how do you decide the balance between these new tools and the tech to ensure that you're not being disruptive to your teams when you bring something out?
Yeah, that's always a tough one. Teams want to be inventive and come up with new ideas to streamline workflows, but working and having those internal meetings to make sure we're bringing all that feedback and taking a look at it on how it impacts, the organization as a whole. And maybe it's just something that's changed for a specific market type. But really, we really have to be cognizant and kick the tires on that and make sure it actually fits into everything and, where are the pitfalls in there. But that, being a big organization, right, it makes it tough to capture all that and make sure things aren't happening outside in their separate silos.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've come into. Just recently I had somebody call me and he's like, but I have this great way that I track progress. And I'm like, I understand that, but it's on your computer.
Yeah.
And it's not on anyone else's. No one else has access to that information. So it's not helpful to grow the whole team and track the progress on the project. So let's look at this other way. But you have to be really careful, right? You can't just overwhelm them. So you have to kind of, watch each project team and help give them the feedback when they're ready for that next step. I had a professor in college a long time ago talk about zone of proximal development.
I like that. I'm going to write that one down.
Yes. So it's really interesting because you don't want to give somebody something that's outside their zone. Like they can't, if you're giving them way too much, they don't retain anything. So you kind of have to, build those blocks, get that trust so that they're ready to go on to that next step.
And I love that you focus on the trust piece too, because you've built that relationship. And especially if there's a little bit of hesitancy or some contention early on, you get to step back and go, okay, let's try this. Let me prove to you that I'm doing this for a good reason. And if you do follow through and they come out and they go, okay, I settle into this now and that worked out really well. When you come to them next time and they go, well, I've got this other process, and you go, but let me explain to you this other thing, they're going to be even more accepting of what you've done. You only get to make a first impression one time. And if you, jump outside of that zone and go, here's a data dump, you're doing it wrong, do it this way and walk away, they're probably not going to have a good opinion about you, unfortunately.
That's true. That's very true.
So let's think about that feedback loop that's come up throughout our conversation today. How do your teams set that up to continuously improve your efficiency and communication, and how are you messaging that? Like, what is the nuance from a big picture? So you've given a great example of that individual, but say you are bringing a company-wide initiative out. How do you start that conversation and inform that messaging from the start?
So one of the things that we do heavily have a lot of webinars and things like that. But every 2 years, we have a summit where we bring all of our employees. So right now, it's about 2,000 employees that are going to come together next January.
That's awesome.
And it's amazing. It's so powerful. And one of the things that does is roll out some of the new initiatives or just kind of validate the things that people are doing. So in this January, we have 2 COOs, and they're going to be presenting on here are our expectations for your use of Build and kind of rolling that out. And a lot of it, people are going to be like, we've been doing that forever. But we're going to catch people in that room that's like, oh, I guess I need to speed up here, right, and get on board. So, having those points where you're like, okay, this is what we're doing now. And just really making sure that we're talking to each team, each office, and getting that message out there.
I love that broader validation too. And, it'd be easier, say you're a super and you're watching that webinar from your home office, one of the days you happen to work remotely, or even just the main office or wherever you happen to be that day. You're watching that and you're going, no, this is silly. I don't need to do this. It's very easy to be in your little bubble and go, I'm going to just dismiss this and keep doing what I'm going to do. But if you're in a room with 2,000 people and 75% of the people are going, that's how I do it, and this is the great ROI I have, it's a whole lot harder for them to push back and go, well, I want to do it this way. It might still happen, and you might still have those conversations, but I think, occasionally there's a value in that group think of everybody going, this is how we're doing it, and this is why, and, continuing to broaden that out. I love that. That's great.
Yep.
How are your teams handling that narrative when you bring, big changes to the organizations, especially?
Yeah, I mean, on the smaller side of things, I have a regional manager group, right? I'll bring them together. We'll discuss what's going on in the areas and then make a determination on what we want to change from a quality perspective. From the larger organization, we have an operational excellence team that, we can submit that feedback and those ideas to where then we have a team that kind of vets those out and sees how they'll impact the organizations and decides how we're going to do or what we're going to proceed with, and then work through that marketing and roll out message to make sure it gets communicated out to the company.
And it is a marketing initiative. It's an
Mhm.
internal one, and it's a very deliberate one. But I love that you pointed out that there is still this focus of getting that feedback too, because when you go in and you blow up their processes a bit, it's very easy to not realize that you've actually introduced something that's more burdensome than it was before. And if it is more burdensome, you better have a good reason for that happening and help them understand why. Because that bigger picture narrative that they might not have visibility on might not be super obvious. So they're going to be frustrated where they go, this takes me 10 minutes now and it used to take me 2.5. But help me understand why it takes 10 minutes and the value that I'm going to get from that. And that's a different conversation versus just this one-way rollout where you show up and you go, here's your new tool. This is how you're going to use it. You're all mad and we don't care.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might have to do that. Let's be real. Like occasionally you just got to bring out the thing and put it in and we're doing this. But wherever you can, I think that it's a conversation,
I think it's like you said, you got to show them the why we're doing it, and then the value piece. How does that help them do their daily job?
Yeah, it's a big communication process. And as the teams scale and grow, that becomes more challenging. And I think your point about touching on the regional managers, so you kind of have that midpoint to funnel, how are these different groups doing it? And then you get to build your broad, marketing communication, even if it is an internal one. It's I think it's a big win and a big piece of that puzzle overall. So that's great news. So I have 2 more questions for you, and I'm going to throw the first one at you, Brandon. And I'm interested to hear, what are some of your favorite industry trends that you're seeing in the market right now? And do you have any predictions for the next 5 to 10 years as far as where the construction industry is headed?
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's going to say AI, right? That's the big one. But
Yes.
I think it starts kind of getting, with getting all that data and having those predictive analytics, at least being able to look at it and being proactive and see those red flags before they happen out there so you can make those changes. I mean, some of the other interesting stuff, VR, AR, we've dabbled in some of that, and then some of the devices out there for scanning and kind of, capturing the rooms and the state of things out on the job, I think are a big improvement.
And the hardware is getting there now to a point where I think 3, 4, 5 years ago, some of this was a bit more of an idealistic vision when we're talking about AR and VR. Like the headsets were a little clunky. Some of them didn't work well. The laser scanning, like what we're doing with laser scanning and photo scanning and everything is incredible these days versus, you set your scanner in your middle of your space and then you push the button and run away and then go hide for 8 hours or whatever. The narrative has changed. And I think I encourage anybody who looked and put on a VR headset 5 years ago and went, or I'm just demoing my, spaces to my potential customers, take another look because it's changed radically, even in the last 1 to 2 years. So I love that answer. And I think it's very topical. So Christy, what's, on your mind? What are you excited about? And what do you see happening next?
Yeah,
10
I
years?
definitely think the VR is something that we're continuing to explore, and especially on the training aspect of things, I keep talking to them like, well, you're not quite there yet. Like, how do we deploy that when we have 10 offices and projects in 22 states? But I think it's definitely getting there. So that's really exciting. And then just the using our manufacturing and prefabrication, we have to continue to grow that because it has to supplement the workforce that's not there.
I've heard Andrew, I've heard Jim Lynch all speak at length about that convergence of design and manufacturing. It's such an opportunity. And, historically, some folks had some hesitancy with modular construction or prefabricated construction, depending on what you were trying to introduce as far as scope goes. But I think that's changed because these are no longer just ugly square boxes that you stand up. These are incredibly beautiful facilities. Prefabricated, when you think prefab with mass timber, some of those facades are incredible and just really beautiful and really introduce innovative ways into the way we build. But also, as you just alluded to, when you're bringing this off of site and you're introducing this controlled environment, the labor conversation changes, but it also increases the safety aspect of everything because you have this controlled environment and you got less people on site. That seemed weird, I think, 3 years ago when we were all kind of forced to do some of this stuff. but I'm really encouraged because folks are talking about it in a way where they go, okay, before I was hesitant and I got burned because we didn't think about it right. But the cloud tools are starting to make this, workflow make a lot more sense. And I think it's going to really empower a lot of teams as they continue to grow their business. So I appreciate that. All right. Final question for both of you. Brandon, what is one tool that you'll always use on every project that you work on?
That's a tough question. I mean, there's a lot of good tools out there. Thinking about it though, the iPad comes to mind, right? Because that's where all the technology, the software, the stuff we use out there to help be more efficient and execute the job and provide that transparency. It's kind of the delivery device for all of that.
I love that answer because it's a contributing factor as to why I'm sitting in front of you right now, if I'm being honest, because my journey into Autodesk was through the PlanGrid acquisition. And PlanGrid really became a thing when the co-founders of that company saw the iPad and said, I think we can digitize our drawings. And obviously there's been a scale of innovation tied to that that's, just grown and grown and grown. And it's in a different iteration today. But I'm incredibly thankful for that because it really started that journey. And it's, partly responsible for why I'm, privileged enough to be sitting in front of both of you. So I love that answer. That's great.
Yeah.
Christy, how about you?
I would definitely say the iPad and go one further with Build. I mean, I know I'm not getting paid to say this.
I didn't pay her to say this, I promise.
But seriously, the ability to bring everything together, have all of your information in one place, and then have our field teams and our operations teams working together and communicating instantly is going to change the industry.
I love it. And I agree. I'm biased, obviously, coming from Autodesk, but I think, just this increased focused on a platform approach in a meaningful one where everything is centralized. It's such a different conversation because, you look back 10 years ago, we didn't have technology like this. We didn't have these specialized tools that were built for us by our industry. Like most of the folks that work at Autodesk that have these influential roles, many of them come from the industry as well. And so it's just encouraging to see this feedback loop and in the growth of these tools. And, I think we're going to be the benefactor for it in the long run. I feel like some folks sit in decision paralysis sometimes because we went from nothing to a million things. Like look walk around the expo hall where we're at right now and you go, oh my gosh. But I think it's easier to align on the central platform that you build your tech stack on, and making those choices is easier than ever if everything integrates in the way that it's supposed to versus where, folks were talking about this, 5 or 7 years ago. It's changed. So I love that answer too. Well, I appreciate both of you taking your time to join me today on Digital Builder. And of course, I'm your host, Eric Thomas. If you enjoyed this show, if you're out there listening in the mass of humanity off to my left, make sure you check out Digital Builder on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We are a video first podcast as well. So head over to the Autodesk Construction Cloud YouTube channel and you can watch all of our backlog. All of our episodes are up there. And if you're interested in hearing more from me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Eric Thomas that works for Autodesk. Alternatively, you can find me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. I am builder_digital. And without any further ado, goodbye.